I really would like to lend my voice to the people that have less of a voice. It's an easy thing to do when you're in the public eye. So let me take my voice, let me take whatever odd interest there is in me and try to lend that to something good. The modern woman is a woman who isn't complacent. The modern woman is a woman who is a pioneer, someone who's cognizant of the future and the fact that we can make a change. And
when I was in school, I was involved in every single club and activity, but I didn't know what I was doing half the time. This is my second movie and I feel like, okay, I'm an actress, but I have no idea what I'm doing.
My best friend and I, when we were in 10th grade, we had like crazy crushes. We would drive around, like stalk these guys. We decided one night to go to the arcade where they were, and I put bronzer all over myself in a Scary Spice fro, so I thought they would think I was like a black girl, and so I could stalk them. My friend dressed up as like this goth girl.
Hi, besties. The fallout for Blake Lively and Stephanie Jones in their scheme to take down their enemies has hit an all-time high because Stephanie Jones has now allegedly lost her biggest client, Tom Brady. He dropped her around the exact same time that news broke about a lawsuit that was filed by Blake Lively under a company called VanSham Inc. After news broke that Stephanie had turned over the contents of one of her employees' phones to Blake Lively through a sham lawsuit and a sham subpoena where there was no defendant being sued. The former employee was not notified that her data was about to be handed over, and the company that was being exploited and invaded of their privacy, Wayfair and Justin Baldoni, were also not notified. A violation of due process, a abusive process, and an ability for them to get information that they otherwise would not have been able to obtain and not allow anyone to object to a subpoena. And the subpoena was being done because Stephanie Jones had already disclosed this information to Blake Lively in violation of a confidentiality agreement that she had with Wayfair Studios and Justin Baldoni. And also, Stephanie Jones had obtained the information without the consent of Jen Abel, effectively taking an employee's company-issued phone, but without consent or authorization, went into the private and personal iCloud, photos, and text messages and emails of that former employee, and then distributed that confidential information to a third party for the purpose of destroying her former employee, trying to destroy her former employee's business, and so that Blake Lively could destroy her former co-star and director of her movie, It Ends With Us. They combined together and created a mess. And when this lawsuit was discovered by me in April, none of us could have foreseen the cascade of events that would follow us. And many of us had no idea what was happening behind the scenes because we had no idea that finding that subpoena lit off a fire and exploded. And everything that we have seen since is all to try to cover up and deflect from that possible criminal activity. Because once that lawsuit was discovered and the sham subpoena was discovered, immediately Stephanie Jones's attorneys ran over to Billy Bush on Extra and said that this was a normal lawsuit. Everyone uses them. They denied it was an abuse of process. They said it was not an end around. They said that it was completely a viable option. Blake's attorneys went on record and stated that the subpoena was how Blake Lively gathered evidence from Jen Abel's phone, despite Jen not getting notified, or Justin Baldoni or Wayfair. And that discovery led to Miss Jen Abel filing and amending a counterclaim against Stephanie Jones, which included violations of the Federal Wiretapping Act, violations of the Stored Communications Act, and violations in the Electronic Records Act, which are all how the United States government protects our privacy as private citizens. The most alarming aspect of this case to me is the blatant disregard for other people's privacy and the lengths that two people with a serious vendetta and out for blood went in order to get dirt on the people that they were mad at and how they used that to destroy people they were mad at. Vengeance. But when Stephanie Jones' lawyers were on the extra with Billy Bush, they seemed very nervous. They even said that her business was on the verge of collapse, that their client had been in the news for all the wrong reasons, and her business was taking a beating over false allegations. What we didn't know is at that same time, her biggest client, Tom Brady, was allegedly firing her. And while she continues to try to deny it, someone from Tom's inner circle all but confirmed that Stephanie Jones and Tom are no longer working together for all of the reasons I've mentioned thus far. Now, Tom hasn't said anything publicly. Yesterday, I announced on my Instagram and on my channel that Tom had fired Stephanie Jones, and it was directly related to Stephanie's mishandling of confidential information and the disturbing information that has come out as a part of these lawsuits between Stephanie Jones and Justin Baldoni. Your biggest client, who is signed to a $375 million deal with Fox for the NFL, he has one of the biggest deals, Tom Brady, with the NFL to do the NFL color commentary on NFL games for broadcasting, $375 million. He's making anywhere from $20 to $25 million per year on Fox. Stephanie Jones was taking a cut of that deal. Stephanie Jones was taking a cut of his net income every single month. And it was his products and brands that she was helping promote, which she took a cut from as his publicist. And she just lost that huge paycheck. This is probably as the biggest loss that her company has ever had to take. And if you had done nothing wrong, your client, Tom Brady, would have no reason to fire you, right? I mean, if everyone believes Blake and everyone believes Stephanie, why would Tom Brady cut ties with Stephanie Jones? Well, if your publicist was admitting to handing over all confidential information through a sham lawsuit and the clients weren't notified, how would that make you feel if you were one of her clients? That you knew you're only 2 steps away from all of your confidential information being put out into the world? That's what Stephanie Jones did. So if you start to see negative publicity about Tom Brady in the coming weeks, just know where it's coming from. So that's a huge loss, right? But then only a couple days, weeks later, we find out that not only were they doing the sham subpoena and the hacking of Jen Abel's phone, but Blake was threatening Taylor Swift. And so again, Blake Lively is alleged to have demanded via her attorneys that Taylor Swift put out a statement of support for her after she wasn't at the Super Bowl, after Blake wasn't at the Super Bowl, and that Taylor was supporting Blake in the lawsuit. And Taylor refused. And there was a threat that if she didn't put out the statement, that Blake would release 10 years of text messages of Taylor's to humiliate her. And Blake's entire attorneys, they all cried foul. They said they didn't extort anyone, that Michael Gottlieb certainly didn't do this. Brian Friedman said he had a source. That source turned out to be Scott Swift, Taylor's dad. And Wayfair now is sitting on evidence that they allegedly threatened Taylor Swift, including Michael Gottlieb allegedly threatening Taylor Swift. And so how did they respond in the public? So what they did was they started just going on this rampage of filings. Within days of that subpoena becoming public, they started filing motions to compel to make it look like Wayfair wasn't complying. They started accusing Wayfair in documents of wiretap fraud and illegally recording phone calls. That's what Leslie Sloan said, okay? And they started trying to deflect and paint Wayfair as doing what they had done. What else do? They file for sanctions, knowing that there's the likelihood that Blake Lively's team and her and even her lawyers are on notice and likely to be sued for additional counts. And there's a possibility here of criminal exposure. They started accusing Wayfair of filing frivolous lawsuits. They demanded sanctions from the court. over obscure rules that have nothing to do with this case and are rarely used in court. Rule 11 sanctions, demanding that they withdraw their lawsuit days after the sham subpoena became public. So, in the span of a few days of that sham subpoena going public, they started panicking. Stephanie loses her biggest client, Tom Brady. Her business is in tatters. Blake and Ryan start plotting about sanctions. They start doing motions to compel. And Leslie Sloan decides, I'm going to target the Daily Mail journalist, James, and I'm going to demand that he hand over everything to me, because I'm not getting it from Melissa Nathan. And because I'm not getting it from Melissa Nathan, I'm going to take an end around and go to James, who's a journalist. These are the same people, Leslie and Blake and Ryan, who applauded when the discovery process was halted for the New York Times. And they said that the press's right to have privilege was a necessary and absolute right. Blake is actually asserting reporter's privilege as a part of her motions to dismiss. And yet they are demanding now that a reporter hand over all of his information after scolding Wayfair for suing the New York Times. And we're getting a little bit more understanding of just how far Leslie Sloan went for her clients again to take the fall. Okay. Because April 18th happens 3 days after the sham subpoena becomes public. And suddenly she is sending a subpoena to James, who works for the Daily Mail. James has now filed a motion to quash in court, and he has provided a copy of the subpoena that she's requesting he hand over documents. And there's something pretty interesting here. On April 18th, Leslie Sloan contacts and subpoenas James. She's demanding all communications with any of the Wayfair parties concerning the film, the Lively, Reynolds parties, the Sloan parties, Baldonian allegations in the above captioned matter. Okay. Mind you that James was communicating with Leslie during that time period, and Leslie was planting stories with James during that time period. So Leslie knows James. Pretty hostile to go after someone that you have a relationship with, don't you think? He objected to the subpoena, and he said that the grounds that the discovery sought was available from other sources, i.e. Melissa Nathan or Wayfair. Stephanie Jones just literally objected a couple weeks ago that it was unnecessary for Wayfair to subpoena her security company for information on how they extracted the information from Jen's phone, which is completely different than what Leslie's doing here. But they said that it was an end around. This is what I would actually call an end around, okay? Because according to James's attorneys, she admitted after she subpoenaed him while they were talking in their meet and confer that they need the discovery from him because they had already requested it from Wayfair, but they were still negotiating with them and haven't moved to compel that information from them. So she already asked Wayfair to give this information to her related to James and their communications with him, but she wasn't satisfied. She wasn't going to compel them, so she was just going to harass James. They claim that they need this from him because the other parties are adversarial and therefore cannot serve as a reliable source for the information sought. That's interesting. Again, suggesting that Wayfair wouldn't comply with discovery when they're the one, again, that abused the discovery process with a fake lawsuit. And it says, because the Sloan parties must but have failed to first seek it from Wayfarers before burdening James, it should be denied and quashed. He's seeking reporter's privilege, which, I mean, if the New York Times was able to get a stay on discovery pending their motion to dismiss, I can't understand why it would be even remotely acceptable for her to demand that James, another reporter, have to hand over his records. They say that a reporter is not obligated to publish all news gathering materials, and they have privilege to protect all of their sources. They are given a shield law in the state of New York, preventing them from the abusive discovery process that people like Leslie will use in order to get information on their sources. He also notes that the subpoena is overbroad. It's seeking all communication with Melissa Nathan. They say that the Sloans do not even attempt to show how the subpoena meets the other requirements of reporters' privilege, such as materiality, relevance, and critical necessity in the order to overcome it. This is a group that literally applauded when Judge Lehman paused discovery for the New York Times so that Wayfair was not able to obtain information from the New York Times. But now they're literally going to James to demand that he hand over information that they've already sought from Wayfair, but just haven't asked for them. This is what James' attorney said. The Sloan parties argue that any testimony from the Wayfair parties about what James meant in his communications with them would be wholly speculative. But this is irrelevant because the subpoena seeks documents, not testimonies. They're trying to get information from James about what he meant when James, in a text message, said she never said anything about sexual assault before. She's seeking documents from James, but she wants testimony about what he meant about that comment to the Wayfair parties. She isn't asking for a deposition from him. She's asking for documents. So James and his attorneys are seeking to quash the subpoena, and I honestly feel like they'll probably get this met. When I took a look at what was contained in the subpoena and what she wants from him, listen to what she's demanding he hand over. All documents concerning the Sloan parties, including but not limited to telephone, video, and voice recordings. All documents and communications concerning the film. Documents sufficient to show the location where you made any telephone, video, or voice recordings of the Sloan parties. Documents sufficient to identify all persons who were party to any telephone, video, or voice recordings. All communications with Melissa Nathan. All documents and communications concerning your statement, she's saying that Blake was sexually assaulted. All communications with any of the Wayfair parties concerning the film. All documents and communications concerning the Wayfair party solicitation of you or others to publish negative material about them. Leslie knows that she planted many stories with Daily Mail. She knows she did. And yet she's going to the same reporter that she worked with in August and demanding that he now tell her about all the stories that were planted when most of the stories had two sides of it, meaning they were likely talking to both sides' publicists. So she's well aware of what's being put out. She knows exactly what happened and she was party to these conversations. This is literally, in my opinion, just a way to harass him and to try to deflect and pin something on Melissa that she didn't do. They want to try to show the world that Melissa paid them to write negative stories about them, which isn't true and didn't happen. Like, who pays who pays a magazine to write stories? It's usually the other way around. And she wants all documents concerning their efforts to seed, influence, manipulate, boost, or amplify on social media algorithms. James was literally he's an entertainment reporter with 20 years of experience working in the field of entertainment reporting for numerous media outlets. What the hell would he know about seeding, influencing, or manipulating a social media algorithm? He wasn't an employee of Wayfair. It's just her attempt at grasping at straws. If this subpoena tells us anything, it tells us that they have no case, that they're going to these random third parties that know nothing. And when he responded to these, he said he doesn't have any telephone or voice recordings of Sloan. He said that he doesn't have documents concerning the film. He doesn't have voice recordings or telephone videos or anything. She asked 7 different ways about these videos because she really is trying to frame and flip the narrative and try to make it look like Melissa Nathan wiretapped and intercepted and illegally recorded her phone calls. That's what that's what they're trying to do because they know right now that that's what Wayfair has on them. So they're going to try to paint that on Wayfair. It's very rare you get to see the inside look of what these narcissistic people do, but you're seeing it in real time. Demanding all information and conversations with Melissa Nathan. And he denies that he has any of this information. He denies receiving payment. He denies working for anyone. He denies having any relevant materials. You can't prove a negative. You can't give something that you don't have. This entire subpoena is literally just designed to harass. You know what I find super interesting about this process, though, is that because Brian Friedman and Wayfair are sitting on all this evidence, right? So they know from Scott Swift, apparently, that Blake and her attorneys allegedly threatened Taylor Swift, right? So they know that. They also have verifiable evidence of what Stephanie Jones did with Jen Abel's phone, right? They have plenty of evidence to prove what happened. They also have documented evidence that nothing happened on the set with Blake. They have documented evidence of all of Blake's threats towards them. They have documented evidence of how she extorted them and used and leveraged these false allegations to gain control on the set. They have documented evidence and cooperation with reporters, i.e., James, who has clearly helped them by providing some details about what Leslie was doing with him in August. And so, what Leslie's trying to do is she's trying to flip it and act like, well, I wasn't the one doing it. It was Melissa Nathan. They have actual evidence of Leslie Sloan defaming them through the Daily Mail, and Leslie knows it. And now going to the reporter to subpoena him feels like, in many ways, they're doing this to harass and intimidate him, make him pay, make him have to hire lawyers, make him have to go through the court system, make him have to fight with their legal teams now. Even though at one point it would have appeared that Leslie and James had some sort of relationship because they were texting together and getting details and getting information for stories. At some point, she was fine with James until she wasn't. And now because James has shown them what Leslie did, now she wants him to show her what they did to her, which you can't, again, prove a negative. And Wayfair doesn't have to intervene in these kinds of motions because, quite honestly, what do they have to hide? Nothing. Blake and Leslie and Stephanie have intervened as much as they can in anything that the Wayfair parties do. If Wayfair parties try to get information from other people's attorneys, it's an abusive process. If they try to go to a security company that literally extracted data from Jen's phone and is relevant to this case, they're accused of abusive process. They're accused of doing an end around. They're accused of violating attorney-client privilege. But yet when they do it, it's fine. And on the flip side, Wayfair doesn't ever intervene with them and say what you're doing is wrong. Because I kind of feel like when you have so much evidence in your favor, all you have to do is just let the other side kind of continue hanging themselves and giving them all the rope that they need because they keep making mistakes. So they're now harassing James. The subpoena tells me they have no evidence whatsoever of a smear campaign. Nothing. If you're going to James for information on seeding and manipulating social media when that's not his job, when you're going to James and asking him and demanding him if he was paid, I mean, did you pay him, Leslie? If you're going to a third party reporter who has no stake in this outside of he wrote some stories and continues to write some stories, what kind of evidence do you have? I thought this was a untraceable smear campaign. I didn't realize now we're looking at journalists who apparently plant stories. And so you see what they're doing to the reporters. You see how they're trying to set this up like Melissa is the one that was doing all of these things to Blake. You're seeing how they're trying to flip the narrative because Wayfair actually has evidence of what they did to them. They actually have the evidence. Blake does not. Blake can't prove it because it never happened. And as more and more people are learning about the subpoena and the threats to Taylor Swift, it's becoming a cascade effect where you get someone like Tom Brady, who has apparently cut ties with Stephanie, although Stephanie doesn't want anyone to know that he cut ties. And today, when an article was published about one of her new clients, and the headline correctly stated that Tom Brady's former publicist was now working with the quarterback of the Chicago Bears, it suddenly got corrected, and it's no longer Tom Brady's former publicist, but now it's Tom Brady's publicist. I mean, that article was citing quotes from the quarterback and talking directly about Stephanie Jones. So Stephanie would have approved that story. But once it's published and I say, hey, look, they're calling him former publicist, suddenly now it's still publicist. People behind the scenes, like journalists and in the industry and, former people that worked with Jones and other publicists and other industry people, they all know that Tom left. Everyone knows. But Stephanie just doesn't want anyone to know, I guess. Because what kind of message would that send to her other clients if Tom left? And what about Blake? what has the fallout been for her? If she's been so believable, wouldn't there be more people coming forward and speaking out? Well, it turns out that the fallout for her is only getting worse because now Taylor Swift has apparently gotten her revenge against Blake Lively, and James over at the Daily Mail is reporting that Blake Lively's humiliation takes a savage turn as Taylor Swift's A-list bestie gets the ultimate revenge after text betrayals. So her besties, Taylor's, are getting revenge against Blake. Apparently, Cara Delevingne and Sophie Turner, along with Gigi Hadid, have all cut ties with Blake. They want nothing to do with her. So Cara is this is what the insider says. Cara is no longer friends with Blake, but there was no big fight or anything like that. She just hasn't talked to her in months and has no plans to or to hang out. Cara likes to keep her circle small and only surrounds herself with people who she can trust. There you go. She's not a trustworthy friend. Apparently, she's very loyal to Taylor Swift, and Taylor has been there for Cara for years, and so she's going to be around someone that she trusts, i.e., Taylor over Blake. And then they also said Cara does not like to be involved in any drama. She's very supportive of her friends. She considers Taylor to be one of her closest friends, and she does not approve of the way that the events of the past several months have unfolded. So apparently, having Blake refer to Taylor as her dragon and then threaten Taylor doesn't fly with Taylor's friends. They're also publishing that Sophie Turner aren't close, and it says Sophie and Blake were never all that close, but no one in Taylor's crew has anything to do with Blake anymore. Taylor's friends, Sophie included, are set on keeping in Taylor's good graces, and they have no problem whatsoever on cutting ties with anyone who does Taylor dirty. So if you are someone that is a victim of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and Taylor is someone that's publicly supported victims in the past and friends, and her friends and Taylor are basically saying they wish they never met Blake. We can't trust Blake. She did Taylor dirty. She used Taylor. She exploited Taylor. She threatened Taylor. Do you think the mainstream media at some point is going to catch on to the fact that people like Tom Brady are checking out? Taylor Swift is saying, I don't want anything to do with Blake. Don't you think it hurts Blake's credibility that her quote unquote best friend is cutting her off? And it's not because Justin Baldoni dragged her into a lawsuit. It's because Blake positioned Taylor in it by constantly using her as a weapon and lying about it. If everything were as it seems, why would everyone be running away from Stephanie and Leslie? Why would clients be dropping them? Why would friends be backing away? Why would Gigi Hadid suddenly want nothing to do with them? The only friend that literally is standing beside them is Hugh Jackman. And if you haven't been paying attention, Hugh Jackman's ex-wife, Deborah, filed for divorce and basically went public with the fact that he cheated on her. And now Hugh is mad that Deborah disclosed that he cheated on her. I mean, I guess Hugh Jackman is basically just like them if you're going to get mad that your ex-wife is saying the truth about what you did. The only person on their side is someone that's just as scummy as they are, apparently, because the ones that apparently are not as scummy don't want anything to do with Blake or Ryan. If you're innocent, these same people would have rallied around them. If she was innocent and she didn't do this and she hadn't threatened Taylor and this was all true, the first person that would have been there would have been Taylor. Come on, this is a girl that was there for Kesha, that has stood up for so many other of her friends that have gone through stuff. And this is the only time that she hasn't. It's because of what they did. They stole someone's phone. They hacked it. They took the communications and they literally put it out to try to destroy people. And they're running this narrative, which is an absolute lie, into the ground. No one supports them. And they continue to play the victim in court over and over and over again. And my question is, at what point do they give up? I think their goal right now is to try to exhaust Wayfair and make them just drop their lawsuits because they think that if they just keep filing, it'll just wear them out. But they're too far gone at this point. Wayfair's not going to give up. That's the news today. So I guess Stephanie's losing clients. Leslie's harassing reporters because they have no evidence, and Blake's friends have all cut her off. But she's a victim. What are your thoughts? Tell me in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.